Okay, so we are in module 11 and we are going to deal with effective critical thinking. And under this model, we'll be discussing defining critical thinking, lateral thinking, logical thinking, characteristics of critical thinkers, and then evaluating information, benefit of critical thinking. We'll also look at your perspective when it comes to, thinking, and then problem solving, critical thinking, and then we crown it with reflect, retain, and learn. Now, we live in an environment where the environment is full of information. Now, you have petabytes of information being thrown at us. When you go to the web, there is extensive information. In fact, a number of people have indicated, or researchers have said, that we live in an information explosion age. Now, these data that comes to us, this information that we receive, how do we harness it to make very good decisions? And that is why critical thinking comes to play. So critical thinking provides you with a skill to analyze and evaluate information so that you are able to obtain the greatest amount of information from it. And it also provides a chance of making the correct decisions. And also it minimizes the probability of committing more errors. And critical thinking will lead to a more rational and disciplined thinker. That is what is going to make you. In fact, when we say disciplined thinker, it means you are going to be an independent thinker. It's a self-reflective thinking. You are not, as it were, dependent on someone to make decisions. There are people who always want to confirm something by asking questions before they take decisions. A critical thinker does not do that. So it will reduce your prejudice and biases, which will also provide you a better understanding of your environment. And when you have that skill, it helps you to evaluate, identify, and distinguish between something that is relevant and that which is not relevant. Now, critical thinking is also akin to the study of logic. And where we say logic, we refer to connecting components together or knowledge together, data together to make sense, so to make meaning. And critical thinkers are those who are able to use logic to arrive at decisions. So it is more than just thinking about thinking, or what we call metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about something you are thinking. And it's also about how we take what actions. Critical thinkers do more about reasoning, and they also apply reason, and they are open-minded when it comes to analyzing things, and they use a lot of logic to arrive at their decision. So the ability to reason is often considered one of the characteristics mark of being human. You are human because you're able to reason. Animals don't reason the way we do. And so the standard for a human being, what qualifies you as a human being, is because you're able to reason. And you reason because that is how you are. That's how you were created. You were created to also create. All the things we see under the sun were all created by human beings, from skyscrapers to, the toothpick, what we call toothpick. They were all created by people. So an individual's ability to reason well is a critical thinking skill. And many of the definitions of critical thinking tend to focus on the ability to reason. And reasoning occurs when we use our knowledge. We use our knowledge of one thing and process or statement to determine another, okay? And or statement, we just want to find out if that statement is what? True. So when we are applying reasoning, we use logic to determine what follows what. And human reasoning does not always follow logic, and is often biased with what? Emotions. So for a critical thinker, we are saying that critical thinking is about reasoning. It's about reasoning and applying reason open-mindedness, analysis, and then logic. So critical thinkers require open-mindedness. Open-mindedness is a virtue by which we learn. And in particular, being open-minded means taking into account relevant evidence or argument to revise a current understanding. And it means being critically open to alternatives, willing to think about other possibilities, even after having formed an opinion. Once you have your own opinion, even based on the available data, you are also able to, as it were, listen to other opinions, because there's the possibility that whatever data you use to arrive at that decision can be marred with some sort of errors. So in critical thinking, the step of analysis helps us to discriminate and assess information. And learning occurs in 3 domains when it comes to this. There's the cognitive, there's the effective, and the psychomotor. And in cognitive domain, analysis involves the process of discriminating and separating. And it gives us the ability to break down the complex problems or the complexity of an item or idea and allow us to gain a better understanding. Logic and reasoning are similar, but not the same. Logic is a branch of philosophy that gives the rules for deriving valid conclusion. So let me give you a typical example. A conclusion is valid if it follows from statements that are accepted as fact. You can only conclude when you have a factual statement or a valid statement, and then based on that, you can conclude. You cannot conclude when the premise is what's wrong. And the premise is always the fact. So for instance, a logical statement might be 1 + 1 = 2. This is a rule based on fact. Factual statements are called premises, as I said. When reasoning does not follow the rule, we say it is what? Illogical. So let's now look at lateral thinking. We just discussed what critical thinking is, lateral thinking. So we can look at it from this perspective, that looking at problems in step-by-step fashion. And that is the critical thinking. And this is called linear. Critical thinking is linear, it is vertical. However, often we tend not to line up the premises in a normal step-by-step fashion when we approach a problem in a different order. We are using non-linear thinking, and sometimes non-linear thinking is what we term as the lateral thinking. We don't go step by step. There's no method. There is no a sequential or systematic approach, but we are following a non-linear. We might start, stop, start. A linear one will follow a certain trend, but this lateral thinking doesn't. One of the first steps in developing non-linear lateral thinking is to step out of your comfort zone. Because linear thinking or critical thinking will then follow a certain methodology, and that is known. But the lateral thinking will be stepping outside your domain and probably will be drawing from something that might not be have been applied before in order to arrive at a certain decision. So that is going outside your comfort zone, where we normally say you are thinking outside the box. Basically, this concept involves seeing information or circumstance from a different perspective. A zone is defined as an area set apart in some way. So in critical thinking and problem solving, we sometimes have to get out of the area or zones that makes us comfortable and stretch our thinking. Take note, stretch our thinking. We go beyond the normal. And I'm going to give you an example of some of the things I did to go outside my domain. So an important step in problem solving is taking the time to acquire the necessary information. Often we tend to jump into conclusion before we have all the facts. and that is being prejudiced or prejudiced by some information, being biased by some information we have. And sometimes this is what we happen. Instead of listening, when the person is talking, we have concluded the outcome of that person's statement without giving the person the opportunity to speak. Most managers do that when they are dealing with employees. And for some reasons, when the employee says that, okay, I have a view to share, and when the person starts talking, say, oh, I know what you are talking about, you will never know because you are not in the mind of the person. How can we use our understanding of logic to gather all necessary facts? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. And remember, the premises are often facts or statements that can help us come to conclusion. And with so many events happening on international and national level each day, change is simple as standard course in businesses. And that is why you should not be that static. You should not prejudge or preempt what someone has in mind, or you should not reach at a conclusion, because we are living in an environment where change is what sporadic. Change, everyday things change, okay? And it is the only constant thing in life. Every day we see that. If we can always expect changes in an organization, and for that reason, we need to allow for views and perspectives to come in. Nothing stays the same. And we sometimes are in the position where we are the ones initiating the change. Sometimes that's what happens. And the question in today's culture is not what will change occur in our organization, but how well are employees adapting to the change. You remember Einstein, Charles Darwin, when in his book, he says that Origin of Species, that those species who were able to survive during the supposed Big Bang were those who are adaptable to change, but not those who were strongest or those who had the energy, but those who could easily adapt to change. So adaptation to change is very, very important, and it will help you when it comes to developing your critical thinking skill. So let's look at logical thinking. Logical thinking is a process which involves steps. In general, logical thinking involves checking the component of an argument and making connections between them, which is what we call reasoning. So in logical thinking, we do more reason. In fact, it's more of deductive reasoning. We'll come to that. And the 4 major steps of logical thinking are asking the right questions, organizing data, evaluating information, and drawing conclusion. These are the 4 components of logical thinking. Now, the first one is that the first step in logical thinking should begin with asking the right question. So what is the right question? Based on the component of critical thinking, the logical thinker should begin reasoning by asking many questions. I said earlier that we are not looking for right or wrong answer. We are looking at the statement and we are asking questions. And we are asking probing questions that will not give us a yes or no answer, but actually is providing more alternative. I was sharing something on action learning some 3 days ago, and I was just sharing this, that action learning doesn't deal with solving a very simple issue. If the issue is simple, action learning will not come in. Action learning wants complex issues that are beyond our reach. Like the organization is making it's just doing very, very abysmally. They are not doing well to the stage that, in fact, their liabilities have consumed their assets, okay? They are at the ground zero. That is where action learning, which also has critical thinking, which also has problem solving skills and all that, comes in. And I was sharing that. And you realize that if you are able to ask the correct questions, the right question, and the right questions means that you have a premise that you are interrogating. Because if there is no statement, you cannot ask questions. You cannot ask questions out of the blue. There should be some statement, and based on that, you ask the questions. And you could probe into it, ask more questions in order to get more alternative. And when you're asking the question, you're not shooting it down, just to make sure you get more perspectives to the statement that has been made. So we are saying an important question to ask is, what are the premises? If we are confused about premises, we may make mistakes further down the line in the logical in the logic process. So we should distinguish between whether the statement is a fact or a value, and what should or ought to be the case, and be alert to not confuse the two. Finally, we should check to see if any premises or vital information is missing. A key point to remember is that no conclusions can be made without premises. So in logic thinking or logical thinking, there should be a premise and then there should be a conclusion. The premise is the statement of fact that has been made. Based on the statement of fact, a logic thinking will probe into that fact and then look at it, and based on that fact, arrive at a certain conclusion based on the fact that has been stated. So organizing, the first one is what I talked about. The first step is in logical thinking is to ask the right question. The second one, organizing data is the second step in the logic process. And once we know the premises, we can begin to organize data. We can organize the information by making connections. We can organize the information by making connections. So someone tells you that, for instance, I call and ask, Winnie, where are you? And Winnie says that I'm coming from Tesano. And then I ask Winnie that, where have you reached? And Winnie says that, okay, I am around Royal Fiesta. Then I say that I am also at the mall. So how fast can you get here? And then Winnie says that there's some kind of a traffic. Okay. Then I put this thing on Google Map. Then I realized that, okay, there's traffic from the Royal Fiesta Junction or Jowulu Junction to the mall, right? But Google is telling me that the worst scenario is that it is going to take 15 minutes. And then Winnie says that, oh, looking at the traffic, is going to take some time. And I ask what time. She's unable to tell me. And then I wait for more than 30 minutes and Winnie is not coming. If I'm able to draw these connections based on the fact I have, for instance, the Google map that I checked, and I did a live check and it's telling me that the traffic, even though it's thick, is flowing, and in 15 minutes, Winnie has to be here. I'm able to connect these dots and be able to reach at a certain conclusion. Remember, I'm not guessing, but I'm dealing with what? Fact. So we are saying that an effective method of organizing data includes breaking up information as what I did. For instance, the example I gave that diagramming or laying out the premises. So you look at it from a diagram point of view and then laying out what? The premises. 3 diagrams or breakdown structures are helpful because they graphically show the connection. Why are they talking about graphics? So when you're doing critical thinking, what actually happens is that you are able to break down these things, break down complex problem to manageable what? Fact. And once you draw, it brings to bear vision. You're able to see. We were told that 1,000 words, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So once you can see, once you can write that thing down, it gives some sort of clarity. So we are saying that tree diagram or breakdown structures are helpful because they graphically show what the connection. Okay. So the fourth one has to do with after you have organized the data, the next thing is that you can now draw the conclusion. So what did you do? The first part was to, first of all, ask the right questions. The second one was just to organize the data. The third one is to, after organizing the data, the logical thinker can proceed with doing evaluation. So we have to talk about that. The third one, evaluation. And evaluation information involves determining whether the information is valid. Whether it is valid. So conclusions cannot be made until distinction is made between truth and validity. The information can be truth, but cannot be valid. All right. So people often have trouble separating what is valid from what is true because of their ingrained beliefs. Ingrained beliefs. So beliefs bias occurs when an individual belief system interferes with their ability to come to a logical conclusion. So people have their religious background, and there's a factual statement that is made, and there's also belief. Somebody says that if you believe in something, then it means there's a doubt. There's a doubt because it is not based on fact. Because if you know something, you know about something, then that thing is fact. You don't have to believe in it because you know. So that's another school of thought. So people use their belief to kind of dilute their conclusions. And it happens a lot in those who are Christians and Muslims because their belief system kind of impair their conclusion. So confirmation biases is the tendency to use information to support your hypothesis about what a problem. So we have that confirmation biases because we have a belief, a kind of a belief system around something. But actually the facts are there, but we have that belief and we have this confirmation biases that we just want to do more confirmation just to skew the thing to confirm some sort of hypothesis we have. Remember, hypothesis is just an assumption, right? So the last part is after you have done all this, now you can draw your conclusion. And drawing your conclusion means that you might want to use what we call the deductive. So we say that in deductive reasoning, where you have facts that are available, and then you are using the premise and to be able to reach a conclusion, you are deducing, okay, based on the fact. Now, in deductive reasoning, conclusions are inferred based on what? The valid premises. So we make inferences from it, okay? So I would have said that, okay, Winnie says he's coming to me to see me at the mall. And when I asked where she had reached, she says that she's at Jolu. Jolu, according to Google Map, the traffic was to get to the mall was going to take her maximum 30 minutes. Okay, minimum is what? 15 minutes. So it means that average, we should get some sort of 20 something, maybe 18 minutes or something. But when it comes to the mall in an hour's time, okay, and therefore my conclusion is that Winnie at the time of talking to me was not at Jowolu Junction as she claimed. Because why? Unless otherwise, what Google gave me was wrong. But if it is a factual information, then I can rely on that premise, okay, to make that conclusion. So that's how you do deductive reasoning. Now, in inductive reasoning, we use observations. to draw conclusion or a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement of fact. It could be true or not true. Okay, it's a guessculation, something you guess. Now, inferences naturally flow from what? Evidence, the evidence. In making inferences, the logical thinker should be certain not draw more or less than what is implied. You don't go beyond that. The only conclusion I had was that because Winnie says she is at Joulu Junction, and Google Map was telling me that the maximum was 30 minutes and the minimum was 15 minutes, I could only conclude that Winnie may not have been at that point. But I cannot further say that because of that, Winnie was rather at Tesano rather than Joulu. I cannot make that conclusion because I can only rely on what Winnie said. Okay, the information she gave to me at a point in time to arrive at a certain conclusion. So you don't go beyond what the implication is. Okay, you don't go beyond it. And sometimes we become very biased, and then because of the fact that there's an error that has occurred, we make inferences based on those errors without looking at the fact itself. So instead, infer only what the data implies. Check to ensure inferences are consistent and identify underlying assumptions. So the 4 major steps of logical thinking are asking the right questions, organizing data, evaluating information, and drawing conclusions. These are some points that you need to take note of. So characteristics of critical thinkers. What do they do? These are some of the characteristics. They are active listeners. They do active listening. They are curious. Curiosity, they want to know why. Always, why is it so? They are self-disciplined. They do self-reflection. They are independent. They have humility. They have humility. And let me tell you this, when someone is talking and the person is not done, and at any point in time you want to interrupt the person, you might not know that that is a sign of some level of pride. You might not know, okay? We do that unknowingly because the person is on the floor talking and then he is not done, he or she is not done. But you are trying to interrupt because you think you have a superior kind of argument to make. 5, seeing the big picture, then there's also the objectivity. Objectivity means that your conclusions are not based on any biased, position, and then using emotion and then being self-aware. So active listening, I've spoke about it. It's an ability to, it's a skill. It's something you develop. Most people who do active listening are able to solve problems easily because most times the information you have most times has the solution to the problem. But what we do most times is that we will not listen, but we want to talk. And there have been a number of times where, because people did not listen, they will tend to lose their lives. They will tend to get themselves into problems and then even incur some huge cost because they did not listen. Sometimes your staff comes to you and wants to tell you something, and then you say that, well, what do you want? The person starts to say, no, I know about it. Let's talk later. You were not willing to listen. And then the person leaves and then something happens. There are times where people want to give you very, very secured information, top secret, just to save your life, and then you are willing to listen because you think you know. That can kill you. And then we have curiosity. You need to be curious. Curious means that you need to ask. And this is also a skill, okay? You don't take anything hook, line, and sinker. You don't do that, but you observe things. You look at premises of statements. You want to probe into it and ask more questions. You are not satisfied with what everybody thinks it is, but you want to look at alternatives. You want to ask more questions. You want to look at the disadvantages, the advantages. You want to look at the implications. That is a skill, okay? So curiosity is yet another skill in developing critical thinking. And some scholars believe that Socrates is one of the philosophers, who comes from the Athens. He's known to be one big philosopher. And Socrates' ultimate goal was not so much to advocate his methods, but to advocate self-improvement. You know about Einstein, who also prompted his curiosity by asking questions about how matter and energy function. He wanted them to know, is matter is anything that has weight and occupies space? We said, fine. But what is it? We want to what? Probe into it. We want to probe into it. We want to know what it is. Then we have the self-discipline. That's what I also talked about. That goes with humility. If one is self-disciplined, that person is able to allow people to operate. Okay, you don't look at yourself as always having a superior, advantage over other people. We say critical thinkers are self-disciplined and self-guided. They do self-reflection. Critical thinkers require the individual to use their own reasoning skills, and they don't have to depend on someone. There are people that every day they want to take decisions. They need other people to say that go ahead. They need a mentor. And always I want to talk to my mentor. And then my mentor, you need to come to a stage where you need to realize that if there's no mentor, what do? I tell my family these things, that you live as if I don't exist. So I ask a question, if this then had happened and I was not around, what would you have done? So do what you would have done if I'm not around. But if you are in an environment that every day they have to consult you as a boss, every day they have to consult you, you have not built that skill set in your employees for them to be empowered to take decisions, but would have to rely on you. And then that is going to be something that is going to be a big problem for you. So they show a commitment of self-development and strive to make their own environment a better place. And humility, which is also another point, said humility is defined as the quality of being modest, of opinion, take note of that, or estimate of one's own importance. You are being moderate. Yes, we know you are a doctor, we know you are a professor, we know you are the head of department, we know you own the company, but you are being modest, okay? And humility is the opposite of arrogance. So that's what I said, that not even allowing people to air their views, means that you are not allowing people to express themselves. It means you think you have a superior advantage. So that is also, and that goes with ego. That also goes with ego. So to be receptive to new information or opinions, the critical thinker will have the modest of his own opinion. You have a strong position, you have a strong premise, you have a strong statement to make, but you need to be modest about it. And also seeing the big picture. So one of the main functions of critical thinking is to make connections. Our ideas gain significance when we can relate or connect them to other ideas. And we start to gain insight when we see the similarities between ideas. The way we structure our ideas can be based on how they connect in one or two ways. And causal and conceptual relationships are very important. Since man problems arise due to causal changes, that one thing leading to the other, we will focus on this aspect. Steps in discovering causal relationship includes 1, laying out the account. Laying out the account, what has happened. 2, determining the hierarchy. 3, interpreting the convergence, where these two things, after laying out the account, determine the hierarchy, now interpret convergence, where they converge, where they meet, and divergence, where they do not meet. Convergence are ideas or things that reinforce, supplement, or complement events, whilst divergence are points that do not reinforce events. So where they connect, where they disconnect. If you're able to do that, it is easy for you to see the bigger picture. So I was querying some guys on a certain issue. So I gave this example that there's a problem in the organization. Okay, we are not now selling more. Sales has dipped. And then I get to the marketing department and then I ask, why are we not selling? It said, okay, from the little survey we did, customers are complaining about quality. And they say that the product is also expensive. All right, so it is easy for a manager to place the blame right at the doorstep of what? The marketing department, without recourse to using what we call system thinking to trace this, to know that an organization is a system and you have to see where things converge to be able to analyze things and know the root cause rather than placing the blame at one. So if you were to ask probing questions, you would have asked, okay, so that's what they said, and quality of the product. So let's go back to the operations department and then let's look at something. Okay, the quality control department, they are there. So we contact them. So let's do a quality audit. We do a quality audit and realize that indeed there are issues with packaging the product. I mean, maybe the color we are using is not that sharp. The printers, whoever is printing for us, is not sharp. The product itself, the taste has changed. Probably something happened. One of the machine, the mixer is not mixing well. So there are issues with the machines. Aside that, the labor, the kind of skill sets that we need, the kind of training they need on that new machine, they are not able to set the timing very well. The thing is not mixing very well. So aside the machine has problems, there's an issue of what? I mean, competence that is also missing. And that could be traced to what? HR. HR probably did not look at do a very good gap analysis, skill gap analysis to know actually the competence that the organization needed, I mean, to fill that gap. So you see this, I mean, going through. So you realize that it is not just one department that created the problem, but it is a system that has interrelated parts and they are connected to the other. What we are saying here is that when you are looking at, if you want to look at a bigger picture when you are solving problem, you need to look at it from the system thinking point of view. Look at, lay out the whole thing, the account, and determine the hierarchy, how it escalates, where it is it coming from, and then determine how they converge and also how they diverge. Then also you look at objectivity. Now, when we say be objective, objectivity is based on the available facts you have, right? You can be very objective when you have a premise, when there's a statement, and then you are doing some sort of deductive analysis, and then being, I mean, objective about being very fair in your conclusion. Objectivity is defined as intentness or object external to the mind. Object external to the mind, not internal to the mind. When it's internal, you are using your own biases, okay, external to the mind. And in critical thinking, we have a keen sense of what? Objectivity. And there is that heuristic or rule for problem solving. Objectivity helps to engage more thoughtfully and deliberately in critical thinking process. And however, we should not completely exclude our emotions and subjective feelings in the decision-making or problem solving. We should not do that. Sometimes we are carried away by emotions and we are tempted to be led by emotions and that will lead to a certain conclusion. The most important thing to remember is that evaluating information objectively helps to be more deliberate and thorough. Okay, it makes you a thorough person. You look at the thing, I mean, thoroughly, okay, in its whole, not in part. Now, then we also have the use of emotions. I mean, we've been talking about emotional intelligence, isn't it? Emotions should not be ignored in a way altogether when doing critical thinking, because that is very, very important. Most of the top philosophers we have known today were being led by their emotions to get to where they are. Emotions play a crucial role in thinking process. For instance, professionals need empathy when working with others, regardless of their occupation, in order to vicariously experience what others feel, believe, or wish. The issue with emotions and decision making is not to allow emotions to cloud your judgment. But emotions are very, very important. But you make sure that they do not become the lead for the decision you're making. Especially when you are angry, you don't take decisions. When you're angry in the house or at the office, anytime you are angry, you put on your animal cap. Your instincts work. Reasoning shuts up. So then any decision you take at that material point in time becomes erroneous because you are angry. Now emotions have taken over. Okay. And that is why people get angry, and when they are holding a gun, they can shoot you. People become angry and then they can just take, they crack the windscreen of a car. In that person's normal state, that person will not do that. So, as a manager, when you are angry, it's better you do not even talk, because that is going to create a lot of problems for you. And being self-aware. And self-awareness is yet another characteristic of a critical thinker. You always have to know where you are, where you are coming from. I was just sharing this with one guy who one day called and then hailed insults at another person. And I was telling the guy that even when he started talking, because he has assumed a position of power, he was not aware of himself. If you are aware of himself, that who am I? Who am I and who am I talking to? That is very, very important. Self-awareness will help you to save you from a chaotic, situation, because you reflect on who you are, and then you are very moderate when using words on people. And this characteristic relates to actually being aware of one's feelings, opinions, and assumptions, being aware of that. Moreover, it is the starting point of thinking critically. The starting point of thinking critically is to be self-aware. And our assumptions are how the first impressions and strongest emotions are filtered when we evaluate information. So self-awareness is very important. Then evaluating information. So a big challenge in the process of critical thinking is how to evaluate information. And that is always a problem. You see two politicians, on a panel doing some sort of analysis, and then the same information we are having, our GDP, the fact is saying that it's maybe 78%, and then some people are saying that it signifies that we are doing well. Others are saying we are not doing well. Our import cover is at a certain dollar figure. Somebody says that it means that so you do not really see what is happening. The same information. And when it comes to Christianity, it's the same Bible, but the evaluation is different. People have their own interpretation, but we got to have one interpretation, isn't it? We could have perspective, but the fact is that the statement that has been made is just one statement. You could have perspective, but here again, people have different, views, okay, about it. And we have already looked at some steps in evaluating information with a process of logic. And the best critical thinkers are those people, as Winston Churchill noted, who are capable of gleaning through information that may be unclear or conflicted. They are able to do that. And evaluation, in fact, one component of evaluation is synthesizing information. Just looking at the pros and cons and drawing some sort of inferences out of it. So as we mentioned earlier, self-awareness is a starting point from which we begin to think critically. We base our decision on assumptions we make about objects or things. Assumptions are the arguments, but the distinguishing feature of an assumption is that it is a statement in which no proof, take note, or evidence is provided. Most times we say that in economics that ceteris paribus, all things being equal. But we know, you and I know, that all things have never been equal. Things have never been equal. So the underlying assumptions based on which the economy is being run is based on some assumption that has never been true. Okay, so all things being equal, all things has never been equal. So that assumption has a problem, and it has a problem. That's why we are saying that it's important that in doing evaluation, you consider these things. Assumptions can either be verbally statement or mentally held and unstated. In most cases, they are unstated. We have it in our mind. So confirmation biases can influence the inference we draw. We talked about this. Bias is not something that we can completely eliminate. No, we can't. We will always have our biases. However, when thinking critically, we need to watch out for confirmation bias. And we should ensure that we do not allow our preconceived opinions to influence the way we evaluate the data to the degree that we use that data to confirm what we already believe. That is the confirmatory what biases. It's what we believe, and we are trying to fish out data to confirm that particular belief. And we can use objectivity to oppose the biases. So while evaluating information, it is important to ask the right questions. Equally important is to ask clarifying questions. Whilst we're asking right questions, we ask clarifying questions. And clarifying questions are thought-provoking questions that help the thinker acquire more information. So what if it is not so? What if? So we have a solution. The scenario I gave to you, sales has dipped, and then we are not doing well. And after evaluating the whole process, then we say that, okay, we need to employ some competent staff. We need to fix the machines. We need to do that. We need to do that. Then someone asks a question, when we have done all this, what if we do not still hit the sales? What do we do? Those are the thought-provoking questions, because we are doing that to address a certain problem. But what if we have done that and nothing happens? What will be the alternative? So most times when you generate more alternatives, you reduce the risk of getting yourself into uncertainties, because there are more routes to solve the problem rather than looking at, a yes or no approach. With clarifying questions, you can expect the questions to arise out of answers you receive, and so be prepared for those. Okay. So in evaluating information, this one of the key tools people have been using or used over time. I think that SWOT analysis is overused, but in this context, to explain this, it makes sense. It has been overused. Okay. And of course, it comes with its own weaknesses. And for that reason, you have to make certain assumptions. But you know your weaknesses, your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You know that the strengths and weaknesses are within your internal environment where you're doing an evaluation. They are probably those things that your strengths are those things that you have in terms of your financial capacity, your competence you have. The threats are also internal, something that you lack that you can overcome. Okay. And those ones that are the opportunities and threats are outside the environment. Threats could be government regulation, taxes, and other influences that you don't have control that can hit your organization. And opportunities are also out there as a result of the fact that, there are threats. Some threats can lead to certain opportunities that you don't have any control. It just happened, and then you want to take advantage of it. But SWOT, in my opinion, have been overused. So let's look at the benefit of critical thinking. Now, we have already determined why critical thinking is important. We also know in particular that critical thinking helps us to make better decisions and to rationally apply information. It also makes us become more persuasive. Okay, persuasive, communicate effectively, better in problem solving, and it increases our emotional intelligence. It does. It increases our emotional intelligence. I had an encounter with someone who I just approached and asked. We were supposed to have facilitated a program together. He was given 30 minutes and he spent 1 hour, 30 minutes. I just approached him and said, I mean, gentlemen, that was a good delivery, but you spent all our time. We also had something doing. I needed to do 25 minutes and I moved to another place to do a seminar. And the guy just really told me that you are not a serious guy. Why? What I was saying was very, very important and all that. So whilst he was talking, when he made that statement, I just kept quiet, because ordinarily the old David would have reacted, but I kept quiet and I was listening to him. And so he made his point. Later to find out that he was dealing with a different person who has a higher profile and he has to come and apologize. I told him to forget about it. If I had acted and tell him, do you know who I am? These things are not very important. Emotional intelligence, critical thinking, it will help you, I mean, close up to do these things, because immediately he spoke, I realized that no, I mean, this guy belongs to a certain category, and that's how I categorize people, so that I don't waste my time to engage them. Because what we're talking about is you overspending your time. And I asked a question: if you were invited to speak at the White House and they gave you 5 minutes to speak, would you have taken 10 minutes? And people take things for granted, and they think they can have their own way. Okay, so that's an example of emotional intelligence. We normally think of salesperson and politicians when we hear the word persuasiveness. We do that because they will have to persuade people and make sure they follow them, they vote for them, or the salespeople persuade them so that they can buy their product. However, all managers and professionals use persuasiveness on a daily basis. We do. Anytime we want to have our others accept our ideas, we do so through the power of persuasion. And how will critical thinking makes us more persuasive? It is because critical thinking is a deliberate and thoughtful process. And more deliberate we are, the better we are in expressing our assumptions or ideas and persuading others. So once we have that critical thinking skills, our persuasive skills also go, go up. So additional critical thinking improves communication. For some of the same reasons that it improves persuasiveness, it improves what? Communication. Many of the same factors we use to improve our persuasiveness also make us better communicators in general. For instance, the use of analogies and metaphors are the great persuasion and general communication techniques, where we use metaphor to illustrate, something. Sometimes we end up telling a story, okay? So in addition to helping us in using language more persuasively, critical thinking also helps us use language with more clarity, okay? It does that. And critical thinking and problem solving are closely related and are almost intertwined. They are interwoven. Sometimes we say that to solve logic problems, we must use our critical thinking skills. In fact, logic, critical thinking, and problem solving use some of the same cognitive processes, okay? And critical thinkers use their problem solving skills and not just their intuition to make decisions or draw conclusions. So considering others' viewpoint is easier when we understand the benefits, okay? So critical thinking also helps increase our emotional intelligence we have talked about. I think this is a repetition. And then let's look at perspective. Few more slides to go. Perspective. So the interesting thing about perspective is that everyone has one. Everyone has perspective. In any statement you make, people can make their inferences and they have their perspective. It's okay to accept other people's perspective or to have your own perspective. Open-mindedness is one of the most important elements of critical thinking. And one aspect of open-mindedness is that it makes us receptive to other viewpoints and therefore changes our perspective. And open-mindedness as well as bias relates to the critical thinker's point of view. And the less open-minded and more biased a person is, the more limited their point of view is. And the challenge is in critical thinking is to avoid limitations of your point of view and not be constrained by cognitive or mental blindness. One reason we find it so difficult to consider another point of view is that we are over concerned with our own opinions and view. We think we are right. And sometimes the passion with which we say things, and we are so positive about it, and we think that's what it is. There are no other view. We make statement that it can only be this and nothing else. It can only be this and nothing else. No, you can never say. You can never be conclusive on a statement that has been made or a situation that has happened. There are different perspectives, and that is why even in research, when those doing into econometrics or those into a quantitative study, there's something called hypothesis, and then there's something they call also margin of error, significance level. There's the 10% significance level. It means that if I have data and the data, I have a significance level of 10%, it means that the confidence I have in the data is 90%. That's the confidence interval is 90%. And then the probability that I'll be committing an error, or the margin of error, or the allowance I've given, that there's a probability or the propensity to make an error is 10%. So even in research, we do that. So how can you be conclusive? When it's 5%, significance level is 5%, it means your confidence in the data is 95%. It means that there's a margin of error. And even in scientific studies, I'm a physical science, where people do metaphysics and all that, where they do MRI machine, it's still 99%. It means that the margin of error is 1%. So the MRI can fail. The aeroplane you see can crash because it is not 100%. There's a concept called Six Sigma. And Six Sigma, it says that there is always 3.4% per million opportunities. In other words, if you fly, 1 million aeroplane, you have 3.4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that is going to crash. So we have not reached that perfection, as it were. So why do you think that other people's perspective are not important and that you know it all? That is where I say pride comes in. Okay, then you will be challenged with what? This concept of humility. So a challenge for critical thinkers is to step out down from their mountain of self. And that's why the self-awareness was very important, and climb up the mountain of the other. I like this statement. You step down from the mountain, from the mountain of self, and climb up the mountain of the other. Considering others' viewpoint is easier when we understand the benefits. If we understand the benefits, we understand the synergy we're going to get, from accepting their views, then it makes them comfortable. It makes them part of the whole system. In scientific management, there was one guy called Henry Fayol. He propounded the 14 principles of management. There was one he called the esprit de corps. And that's a French word. Is that a sense of belongingness? The sense of belongingness. What it means is that the person sees that he is part of the system. Once you allow perspective, the person sees that he belongs to, whatever decision that we are making, even if what he's saying doesn't make sense. Okay, there's a story that was told of some guys who were going to somewhere in the north, and this thing was it was one Indian guy that I boarded a plane from Dubai, who told me, I was from Chennai, yeah, not Dubai. We went to Chennai, so I made a trip from here to Addis Ababa, and then from Addis Ababa to Chennai. So when I was coming, I came to New Delhi, and then from New Delhi, as I was using Emirates, I had to come to Dubai, and then from Dubai to Ghana. And then I boarded a plane with this guy, and he told me a story, an interesting story. And he was talking about perspective. So he says, there was this guy's managers who were traveling to the north, and then they had a problem with their tie. So the tie just got off, and then the four wheel nuts all got off. So they were there, and they were in the middle of the road, okay? And there were just trees around. I mean, they could not walk to the wayside because they were probably in the middle. I mean, where there were bush, you couldn't have help. And there was this madman who was just passing by. And the guy went, and there were two of them. So one of them, I mean, was able to get the tie, and they were there thinking about what to do. So this madman got close to them and asked them, "What is your problem? Tell me, and I'm going to solve it for you." And the way he was dressed, the guys thought that this guy was not, I mean, serious. So when the madman was saying, he said, "You guys, I mean, you have to use the brain. Why don't you remove one knot of the other three and then put it on this, and you are good to go?" And the guy heard it. So when the guy heard it, he said, "Hey, come with a tie." The madman was able to give them a solution. The solution was that the other three ties had 4-wheel nuts. So if you could take one, all right, you have 3. So all the ties will have 3-wheel nuts. At least you can get to them. The only thing that saved them was that he listened. This was a madman who had a perspective. And because they listened, they had a solution from the madman. And this thing this guy told me gave me a different perspective to life. Now, when I'm dealing with people, I should not take that superior, position that I know it all, but to allow people to express themselves, because that is going to help. So the other influence on biases is the way the presenter or the speaker frames the questions and the information. They frame the question in a way, they put their biases that the answer you would give will reflect what they want to do. And for instance, the researchers have found that hypothetical questions influence behavior and promote what? Bias. It does. The premise for the hypothesis itself starts with the biases. Okay? Start with the biases. If I ask a question that, for instance, I say that there's the belief, or there's the belief that men, today I think I saw something somewhere that they said West African men are faithful. I don't know where it was coming from. But if somebody has said that West African men are faithful, you understand? This hypothesis is already biased because they say they are faithful. You get it? Whoever couch it in a way to include his own biases. Okay, if they have even said that men are West African men are unfaithful, it's the same thing. Okay, so people do that. The key to not being influenced by hypothetical information is to remember that it is just that and not factual information. When a critical thinker receives new information, how should they organize it? Probably the most common way of handling new information is through organizing schema. Schemas indicate which role new information play. To do compartmentalization information into similar, yes sir, listen, information into a familiar format, which makes it easier for critical thinker use it on the lights. Okay, so you do compartmentalization. Okay, it means you do some sort of segregation. The light is here. Okay, so you put them in compartments, and that makes things easier. So A major function of critical thinking is to give us the ability to solve problems. And here we are talking about problem solving and critical thinking skills. So problem solving has 3 stages. The first one is the preparation and familiarization. And then we have the production and judgment and evaluation. So a major function of critical thinking is to give us the ability to solve problems. That's why we want to think critically. And regardless of the vocation or profession, we are all presented daily with such a host of opportunities to make such decisions and to be able to reason and come out with some sort of structured process and certain steps to solve the problem. So some psychologists define a problem as a gap, a barrier between where an individual is and where they wish to be. So in other words, a problem is the space between A and B. Problems then essentially consist of initial states and a goal state. So a possible solution path leading to a goal state are located in a problem space. And some researchers say that problem solving has 3 primary stages, which I've already talked about. So much of the critical thinking is about how to connect the 2 points, that is the A to B in a problem. And sometimes critical thinkers are presented with inconsistencies or what scientists call cognitive or dissonance. And here we mean the discomfort a person feels when their behavior does not align with their beliefs. When behavior doesn't align with belief system, then we say there's cognitive dissonance. Okay, so inconsistencies can also be called variances and dissimilarities. It is natural tendency to want to eliminate inconsistency when solving a problem. And the best way critical thinkers can identify inconsistency is by using their logic and objectivity to see these variances. And trust your instincts fall under the second stage of problem solving. Okay, trusting your instincts, production, and you should now start to see solutions paths. Instincts are defined as natural intuitive power. Intuition or instincts are key pieces in problem solving. Don't ignore that. Don't ignore your intuition, your instincts, because I can tell you, scientists have been able to do the things they have done based mostly by what their instincts and their intuition tells them. So intuition and instincts are key pieces of problem solving. When coupled with trial and error, informed guesses, and brainstorming, intuition and instincts can lead to a highly creative process. And many scientists' discoveries and inventions were made because the innovator followed their instincts. And think of Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, Albert Einstein, and Socrates and others. They have done many things, based on what intuition. And critical thinkers must always be willing to dig deeper and explore various possibilities. They have to ask questions and then also find out why. These things are very important. So the following is an effective evaluation technique. The first thing in problem solving, make a T-chart to weigh the pros and cons. Do a table, okay, a T-chart, and develop criteria or requirement and assign weight to the criteria. And then you prioritize the criteria. And then when you have done that, you rate the proposed solution using the criteria. So make sure 4 key points, and this one can appear somewhere in your exams. Make a T-chart to weigh the pros and cons of each possible solution, develop a criteria and requirement, and assign weights to each criteria. And then you do a prioritization of the criteria, and then rate the proposed solutions using the criteria. So the last part is retain, reflect, and then learn, right? So now that we have learned many new critical thinking skills, our next challenge is go through this three, I call it trilogy, they retain, reflect, and then, learn. So developing a schema for organizing and remembering information is very important. And that is one method. And the subject of critical thinking and the metacognition, thinking about thinking, is vast. So there are many resources, both online and also in print, that can help retain the information. The most effective technique is to help you retain and then improve your critical thinking skill. However, for you to do the practice, you have to do that regularly. So reflecting and learning from mistakes is also helpful in critical thinking. Anytime you go wayward or you deduce something and then the logic you use, your logical thinking skills was not that effective. So the premise that was used and the conclusion that was reached, they were all wrong. Then you can just go revisit that and then draw some lessons from that. So you may not be able to reflect every time you engage your critical thinking skills. However, whenever possible, reflect back on the steps taken to come to the major decision. You do a tracer study back to see what really happened, and then you can reflect on them. Particularly, managers should regularly reflect on how they interact with their employees, peers, and then supervisors when it comes to this. Because when you are doing a reflection, you want to know who you spoke to, who you asked certain questions, and who gave you the information and why you concluded on that path. So the importance of inquisitiveness cannot be overemphasized in the process of critical thinking. Ask questions. You ask questions. Don't ask for the yes and no answer. Ask for rather alternatives. And I've told you several times that in my class, there's no right or wrong answers. You can be inconsistently consistent. You can be right. And you can be consistently inconsistent. It's all about how creatively you're able to reach your conclusion. So the world is not about looking for right or wrong answers. We are looking at how we can generate more alternatives and then make some gains out of it. So our contribution to civilization that Socrates made was that he advocated that questioning process during debates. Okay. And in fact, in Africa, we've been restricted not to ask questions. Even if you are at home and then you begin to ask questions, they're going to shut you up. But that is what we need in the business environment so that we can innovate. So furthermore, learning is a process sparked by the desire to know more. And the inquisitiveness and curiosity of an individual is the foundation of learning. Take note of this. The inquisitiveness and curiosity of the individual is the foundation of learning. So questions lead to possible solution paths and ultimately answers. And critical thinkers should never abandon the questioning process. And finally, develop ways to remember and organize the critical thinking techniques. Develop a schema and organize information. The way you organize information will reflect the way you think. Additionally, try to improve upon critical thinking and creative thinking, as these two types of thinking tend to support, each other. So, we'll draw the curtains down here. And if you have any questions, this question time you can ask. Thank you so much for your time and have a good evening. So our next edition, which is the last class, is Sunday. We'll look at ethics and then also look at conflicts and how to resolve them. Thank you so much.